Please welcome Greg Gutfeld.
Does anybody want to hold my water? There you go. There you go. When I want it, you better give it to me. It's interesting, when I was walking into this building, no heckling, please. Stand up. You know what? This is over. How dare, Dana's been in Africa. I don't need this. All right. Calm down. I was outside. I was walking into this building. There was an employee out there and holding this sign, "How may I help you?" And I said, "I would like your sign." I am the government. She might get half her sign back, but I doubt it. A lot of things I can do with this sign. So anyway, I'm here not because of Red Eye, because you guys watch The Five. I know that. You guys, Red Eye is on way past everybody's bedtime, unless you have certain urinary problems. Speaking for myself. But I figure you guys have some questions about The Five that I think I'll just answer for you right away. Is Bob Beckel like that all the time? No, sometimes he sleeps. And he talks in his sleep, and it's worse. What's Dana Perino like? Imagine Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde without the Jekyll. She's an adorable version of MacArthur. What's up with Jasper? All she talks about is Jasper. Let you in on a little secret. It's not a dog. It's an immigrant in a throw rug. She's a very sick, troubled woman. Somebody has to talk to her about it. Is Eric Bolling really that patriotic? There's an interesting fact about Eric Bolling. On his back, he has a giant tattoo of the American flag. But the flag has a tattoo of Eric Bolling. Kind of weird. But I'm not one to judge. I'm not a judge. Frankly, I don't even think judges should judge. That's kind of judgmental. People say, they go, "What's with Kimberly Guilfoyle and Andrea Tantaros' shoes?" Well, they weigh an average of 60 pounds, and they're powered by canaries. All right, enough making fun of my co-hosts. Although I could do it all day, trust me. You don't know what it's like. All right. So I didn't know very much about Americans for Prosperity, but I looked it up, and I was really surprised to find out that there's no opposite group. There's no Americans against prosperity. But I was wrong. I actually did some research, and I found out there's Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, Brown, Occupy Wall Street, MSNBC, the White House, most of Europe, Vermont, yoga instructors, animal rights activists, groovy high school counselors who have all the answers. Take a year off, backpack through Europe. Environmentalists, animal rights activists, did I already say that? Pop stars, actors who look like Matt Damon, actors who are Matt Damon, anti-fracking freaks, teachers unions, guys named Kyle in Che shirts. Che Guevara, the guy. He's a murderer, but they wear him on shirts. So in 30 years, we'll have the Boston Bomber on a shirt. And of course, the worst of all, kittens. Who's against prosperity? Kittens. Did anybody follow that story that happened in New York on Thursday? 2 kittens were on the subway track. So they stopped the actual subway, shut down the subway for 2 hours so they could get the cats, these kittens, these adorable kittens off the track. Now, I love kittens. Who doesn't love a good kitten? Between a bun? But hear me out, because this exposes the fundamental hypocrisy of American culture. Why kittens and not rats? Rats are all over the subway. Kittens are just rats with great PR. I'm getting to a point. Kittens, they work it. Rats, they don't work it. Rats, maybe they could, if they just got, maybe worked on their personality a bit, they could become a squirrel. Somehow, I fashioned this into a metaphor about conservatives in politics. We're seen as rats, but we need to be seen as squirrels, or perhaps kittens. The bad news is we will never be seen as kittens, so give up. It's great to be a rat. Rats need to act like kittens so they can eat the kittens. Still don't know what that means. But you know what? It sounds right. Co-opt their beliefs, infiltrate, and then eat them alive. I talked about the Americans Against Prosperity. Interesting story that I came across on the plane, because sometimes I like to read, or I have someone read to me because I'm lazy, and I can afford a reader. Have you heard about these genetically modified plants that glow? Do you know what I'm talking about? Just pretend. Arabidopsis. These are plants in which they inject genes from bioluminescent bacteria into the plants so the plants will actually glow in the dark. This is awesome. This is an amazing invention, incredibly innovative. Think about it for places that don't have electricity. How great this would be. You know who's against it? The leftist creative class. The same people that are against fracking or against any kind of progress on this earth. Kickstarter, which is a fundraising site, had raised $500,000 for these plants, but they tried to stop them. These activists tried to stop it because they claimed that these glowing plants were artificial. It's bacteria. Bacteria is not artificial. People that come out against business and enterprise hate anything that they can't do. That is the bottom line. For all the anger and for all the envy that you come across, it's because they can't do it. And they hate people who can. The anti-man-made movement is really crawled up my butt, so to speak. It's driven me crazy. Do you think an activist that is against modern technology would turn down the best medicine in the world if their loved one or they were suffering from a deadly disease? They sit there and they campaign against for animal rights and animal testing, but you know, if there was a medicine that would cure their disease, they would test it on their grandmother. I'm not making this crap up. Look at DDT. DDT ban, what did that lead to? Thousands, or millions of deaths due to malaria. Look at the anti-vaccine movement. What does that cause? That's caused a rise in measles in Europe. Look at the attacks on the fields for vitamin A-enriched genetic modified rice in the Philippines. This is rice that's created to prevent blindness in kids. Doesn't matter because it's not their kids. Prosperity is mocked. Why is prosperity mocked? Because it is seen as safe as opposed to risky when the opposite is true. Because when you think about it, who really takes risks in life? It's the businessman. The businessman every day is playing with his own money. He's not playing with government's money. He's not playing in a casino called the USA. I compare it to the daredevil. I hate daredevils. Daredevils make me sick. Remember the guy that was going over the Grand Canyon? That's not work if people are praying that you fail. Generally, you root somebody on, but when you're going, I hope he falls, why am I watching this? It's far riskier to open a business in New York City than it is to walk across the Grand Canyon because of the regulations and because of all the stresses involved in trying to start something with your own money, something that you know will fail. That is a true risk. Pop culture has a lot to do with this, I guess you'd say, demonizing of business. If you wear a suit nowadays, you're usually the bad guy. If you carry a BlackBerry, you're probably the bad guy. It's a cliche. My belief is the more boring you are, it's inversely proportional to the risk that you take. For example, I've met Mickey Rourke a couple of times. He's a wild man. If you're looking for Eastern European prostitutes or drugs, call him. but you don't want him to do your accounting. Business suits exist, so Mickey Rourke exists. People in business suits exist so their offspring can protest at Occupy Wall Street. Without businesses, there would be no anti-business. I thought that was a pretty good point. What drives a lot of this acrimony towards business is a misunderstanding that if you earn something, someone else loses. It omits or ignores the effort that's done prior to getting paid. They never talk about how hard you work. It's just that you bought a car and somebody else doesn't have that car. Why is this done? Why do people believe this way? I've studied this for years, and I've done a lot of research, and I came to the conclusion that they're jerks. Prosperity is not the result of luck. Prosperity is a result of work. I don't know a lot of things, but I know one thing. I know how to work. If you're talking to me and I have a blank look on my face, it's because I'm working. It's great for a job, but it's lousy for a marriage. But my marriage is fine, but I'm just sympathizing with my wife who talks to me, and then I'm like sitting around thinking about 16 jokes I can make about Dana's hair. By the way, I forgot to mention, you know that glow-in-the-dark bacteria comes from Dana's hair. I don't know how people don't work. I see a lot of people who want to work no matter what their disadvantages are, they still work. I don't want to know people who don't work. I am a work bigot. I am a workist. I don't know how to get people to work more. I have some solutions. All of them will work. But frankly, I don't know if I want to share them. But I will talk about how I framed my working life. My first job out of college was at the American Spectator, which is a conservative magazine out in Arlington, Virginia. Go ahead and clap. It was a miserable experience for me. I made $363 every 2 weeks. I worked in the mailroom, which, by the way, sexist. It was grim. You want to hear a funny story? And this is true. I'll tell you 2 stories out of okay. The great thing about working in the mailroom and the great thing at a bottom rung job is that you have stories to tell. And then when you move up, it's great because you can tell people these stories and you feel good when you move up. You can't look down at the bottom rung. You should start there and work up. Little poetic language there that I ripped off myself. Couple of memories. My first day on the job in the mailroom, which I don't think they have anymore now that they have email. Maybe they have an email room. I was in there. The other guy that was working in the mailroom sensed competition. Wasn't a big fan of me. We turned out to be pretty good friends. We got married in Vermont. No, I'm kidding. This is a true story. This is a true story. So I'll call my friend Ed. Ed comes in and he goes, look, you're going to get a lot of unsolicited manuscripts. It's impossible to read them. You get them from everywhere. You get them from congressmen, you get them from that. You get them from this guy a lot. And he hands me a manila envelope and he goes, you're gonna get this guy all the time. Don't even read it. Just don't read it. That's what all you gotta do is just write a letter, thank you, we got it, and whatever. And I just looked down on it. Man, I won't tell you who it was, but his name rhymed with Mush Bimba. I'm not joking. I am not kidding. That's how stupid we can be. The other upside of working a really miserable job where I had no money in my pocket and I didn't know how to take a girl out, I had to borrow money on it for dates, was that I got to meet Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, you might, oh, I'm sorry, I was talking about his son. Ron Reagan. Yeah. We took ballet together. See, I hate it when you people jump to conclusions. No, actually, I did meet Ronald. Bob Tyrrell, who was my boss, invited Ronald Reagan over for dinner, and President Reagan does this like twice a year. So he came, and I met him. The instinct of when you meet somebody like that is that it is somebody in a Reagan mask. That's your only, because you actually miss out on the experience because you don't actually believe it. And I remember what I said to him. He said hello, and I said, hello there. Anyway, I'd like to say that I have some in common with President Reagan. As you know, he was an actor, and for a few movies, he played opposite a monkey named Bonzo, and I work with Beckel. So. Stop it! Stop it. I feel guilty for saying that. I feel guilty. Bob is a great guy. Though he does love his crackers. Keeps him trim. So I'm going to tell you a semi-serious story about what happened when I realized that I was miserable in Arlington, Virginia. I was living with two elderly women in a house on George Mason Drive, and I thought, you know what? I want it all. This is how every kid thinks, and this is the mistake, that they want to be famous. They believe they have all the information in their head born. They have the movies that they want to write. They have the great American novel. It's all in here. Somebody just needs to go like this, clack, 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 pull it out because we're too lazy to do it. But we'll tell you about it. The worst thing of the worst sign of a the best sign of a bad writer is that he tells you what he's writing, because that means he's not writing. So anyway, I had this script, and I wanted to be famous. And my fraternity brother his dad was a lawyer for a film director named Arnold Kopelson, who had just won, I think it was an Oscar for Platoon. And this is so like 88 or something. And he said I could get you a meeting with him, which is pretty amazing. I'm a 23-year-old guy, and I don't know crap. Watching my language. And so I said, sure. So I flew to San Mateo. My mom and I went to the shopping mall and went to the Emporium. I bought a $100 suit, got on a plane, sat next to a soap star from All My Children, Mickey something. Anyway, not important. I get to so I'm really nervous. And when I'm nervous, as the people here can attest, I go to the bathroom a lot. It's just a thing. Athletes do it. But I have to keep going to the bathroom because my stomach is going crazy. So that's an issue, not for now. Privately, we can talk about it, but not here, and I'm kind of offended that you're interested in it. But, so I'm excruciatingly nervous. And I go up to this, I think it's like in Beverly Hills. I don't know, because I've never really been there. It could have been Bel Air. And I get up to this nice house, and this little a maid opens the door, and she says hello. And I go, I'm Greg. I'm supposed to meet Mr. Kopelson. She says, come on in. And I walk in. There's a sunken living room, and I hear this booming voice. I'm in the tub. So he was in the bathtub. I've never met him. I'm assuming he meant a bathtub. So anyway, as I'm walking in, so I have memorized essentially the script that I want to tell them, the movie I want to write, the movie that I want to make, and all this crap that I have no real knowledge of. And I walk down, and as I'm walking to the left, I see a butler against the wall holding a tray. And I immediately turn away, and I sit down in front of him, and I'm on this couch. And I'm sitting there and waiting for this man to come downstairs. And I'm just sitting, and it's just complete silence. And it's dawned on me that there's no way I can actually do this with somebody standing behind me listening. I was so worried about what this person thought about me, why that person was there, the fact that this person knew that I was an imposter, that I had no business being there, that I'm probably a loser, that I probably have not a single whit of creativity in my head, and that he actually came from somewhere to get a job in Hollywood, and now he's a butler. And he thinks I'm an asshole. So I was sitting there for 10 minutes. And so Kopelson comes down, he sits down, we have some small talk, and he asks me like what the story was about. And he could sense that I was not in good shape. And I started to tell it, and it wasn't making any sense. I was stuttering. All I kept thinking about was this guy behind me. It was driving me crazy. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, But I just could not get this person out of my head. He was there, and he was in my head, and I was blowing the greatest opportunity of my life. And then Kopelson kind of sensed, this isn't going well. And he goes, you want a beer? And I said, okay. And so he left. And it was either a Michelob or a Lowenbrau, because it was that era of bad beer. And so I sat there, and I was sitting, and I go, you know what? The only way I'm going to salvage this thing is if I actually kind of stand up and I break the bread with this guy, and I say hello, and I try to talk to him, because this is not going to happen as long as he's behind me. So I got up and I turned around to say something, and it was a dummy. It was a weird dummy. Who has a dummy holding a tray? But it was like one of those things that people collect. And I was like, I almost fainted. And so I'm like going like, oh God. You know, it's like that thing at night when you were a kid and you thought you saw a monster in your room, and you turn on the light and it's a hanger on a doorknob, and you're like, oh. But then you turn the light off again, and then you see it again, and you go, it's back again. And then you turn on and go, no, it's changed back into a hanger. But anyway, so Kopelson came back down. I was much more relieved, and I told the script, which was an interesting idea about a man whose id leaves his body and does everything that he wants to do that he doesn't have the guts to do. And it was an idea that I think it was more of a reflection of what I was thinking at the time, that I was too scared to do what I wanted to do. And he was very encouraging, and he said, you know, you should probably quit your job. And he put me in contact with one director who was not the best director, Lloyd Kaufman. If anybody knows that name, Surf Nazis Must Die. No? No? Anyway. So, I went back to the American Spectator and I quit my job. And I got in my car and I drove across country, and I had no job, I had no money, and I moved back home with my mom, and I had nothing. And I was 23, and but I had something. I had my mother, who was the best support that I've ever had in my life. And she's, you know, always been there. But the one thing I learned is that I learned how to work even for nothing. I got up every morning and I wrote for, 6 hours a day. I sent thousands of applications out to every single job you could imagine. I was relentless. And this is back in the day when you didn't have email, so I was mailing this crap. I was going to the post office every day. The high of it was when I sent something to Christopher Buckley, who was editing Forbes FYI, and he actually wrote me a handwritten note. And I don't know how important that is, but if you ever have an opportunity to do something like that to somebody, you should do it, because it was something that kind of made me feel like I was going somewhere. He wrote a note that he said that he thought my writing was great and to keep at it, and when I have something, send it to him. And it was handwritten, and it's like, holy, that's amazing. That was Christopher Buckley, William F. Buckley's son. Jesus. The low point was when a friend of mine had put me in touch with the Wall Street Journal, a fellow there, a young guy there who was on the editorial page, and I had sent the same clips to that guy, and I called him up and I said, hi, this is Greg Gutfeld. I was wondering if you got my samples, my clips. And he said, yes. I go, well, were you interested? He said, no, and he hung up. That name rhymes with David Frum. Because it was David Frum. Do you know who he is? Sometimes when people look like a dick, they are. Is that bad? I got to jump ahead because it says I got 1:12 left and I've got 5 more cards to go. I want to talk about the fact that I've been fired 3 times. Because I think it's important to get fired. You should be fired as many times as you can, because that means you're actually breaking some. I don't mean being incompetent. I mean by doing something out of the ordinary. You're not working to save your job. You're working to kind of do something different. I was fired from Men's Health I was the editor of Men's Health. I was fired for doing a piece called The Best Campuses for Men. It was during the time when all the PC speak was coming up, and it turns out that the publisher of the company came from Georgetown, and I had that as like one of the worst colleges for men. I was gone. But not before I slipped in my editorial letter that I had been fired. Every magazine has an editorial letter in the front, and before it went to press, I slipped in a letter saying that I had been fired and why, and it got in. They stopped the presses. They got half of the country, and it cost them $1 million. They were able to get half of the things out, but they didn't get the other half. And that got me my next job, which was Stuff Magazine, where I became editor-in-chief. And I doubled the circulation of that magazine. It was one of the greatest magazines ever. The reason why I got fired for that, and if you were at the event earlier today, I explained why it involved midgets. Do I need to tell that story? All right. I apologize if you already heard it, and they're flashing this thing at me like I should stop. All right, so I was invited to speak at a How to Create Buzz seminar for the magazine industry. How to create buzz means, you know, how to get attention for your magazine. And they had Oprah, they had Rolling Stone, they had Glamour, they had Stuff Magazine. I said no, because I said, if you need a seminar on how to create buzz, you're hopeless. And I hung up, ha, ha, ha. Then I thought, you know what, that was really stupid, because I probably could have done something fun. So I called back and I said, I changed my mind. And they said, it's too late, we hired the guy from Maxim, which is my sister publication. And I was kind of ticked off, and I thought, well, what could I do? What could I do to create buzz? So I called my friend Jeffrey Beecher, who runs kind of a circus theatrical thing, and I asked him for if he had any little people. Back then, we called them other names, but now we call them little people. I hired them, and I reserved seats at this seminar on how to create buzz. And I had them dressed, one as a dandy, another one as a preppy, and one as a mafioso. And they had clipboards. And on their clipboards, they had their cell phones on vibrate. So when their phones rang on the clipboard, it would create buzz. So when the speaker would start speaking, their phones would go off, and there'd be all this buzzing. But that wasn't the real stab that I was trying to get at. When it happened, I think it was Cindy Levy, who was the editor. I don't know if it was a women's magazine. They all kind of blend, but she said, "Excuse me, would you turn off your phone?" to the one in the front row. And he says, "Is it because I'm short?" It's pretty awesome. But the best part about this was there was a woman who stood up. This had gone on for like 15 minutes. And this woman stood up and said, "Can't we admit that there's something going on here? Look, like, it's like we've never seen 3 little journalists before." And I'm thinking, how bigoted is that? Nobody said a word because they were so terrified of being seen as bigoted or anti-politically correct. She was right. She's going, there's something going on here. Nobody said anything. Then they got security. They got the little guys out. A month later, well, I got called up to the president office and all that stuff, and was yelled at and blah blah blah. And it got into. But the best thing about it is it got into every newspaper. The Post, the New York Times, created buzz. That was the point. I got fired under the rubric of promoted. This is how incompetent magazine publishing is that they never fire anybody, really. They just promote you out of your job. So I became director of brand development, which meant that I hung around in Los Angeles and got drunk and tried to pick up Scientologists. I guess I got to stop because it's 30 minutes. All right. I just skipped a really good story, too. No. I'll just jump ahead. I won't talk about... Okay, so it's good to get fired. It's good to get fired because firing always leads to something else. The midget thing, little person, sorry, got me the job at Maxim. At Maxim, when I worked there, my writing for the Huffington Post alerted Fox News. When I lost my job at Maxim over the article IKEA Sex Party, FNC hired me. Do I need to explain IKEA Sex Party? No. No, no, no. No, I gotta go when half the people say no. 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 All right. It's about, I thought it would be funny to take the instructions. Actually, I changed that. A friend of mine thought it would be funny if you took the IKEA instructions and combined it with the Kama Sutra. That's all it was. So it was just, that's a fairly innocuous way of describing it, but I got in trouble. But then every time that something like that happened, it was breaking some kind of ground, and some of it was good, some of it was bad, but I ended up at the Huffington Post writing really weird stuff that upset the liberals there. I pretended I had this fantasy life. I built this fantasy life around me so they couldn't call me a normal conservative. You know, I was married, but I created a fictional a roommate named Scott, a flight attendant, who was never around, but whenever he'd come home, he'd bring home strangers, and I'd be very upset. And I kept doing this, and you would watch the homophobia from the Huffington Post commenters come after me. And I thought that was an interesting lesson, because only the left can be bigoted, which is fine. Let them be bigoted. Anyway, so now I ended up at Red Eye, which I had no idea what I was doing. I was awful. It was, if you ever saw the first shows, it was really terrible. I was hated not just by liberals, but conservatives. The amount of mail from Fox News viewers that wanted me off the air vast outnumbered the liberals who hated the show, because they were going, what the hell is this train wreck? You got a fat, sweaty guy, me. You got this weird hermaphroditic creature named Bill, and you got this morose, cat-loving weirdo named Andy. What is wrong with this world? Why is it on Fox News? But it goes to my slightly better theory that if you do something every single day, it gets slightly better. Sometimes it gets a little worse, but over time, you get slightly better, and you get comfortable, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, you have a show. And that's because of Fox News, because they didn't stop it. They knew there was something there, and they knew there was something there in me, or else they wouldn't have thrown me into the 5. So I had 3 cards. The 5. Nobody saw that coming. It's been an immense success. My role, my philosophy that you should use in life is whenever you have an opinion, you should pretend that you're drunk. I don't, how do I have 6 opinions every day on something? But I do. I mean, we have 6 topics. Sometimes we have 8. How could I have an opinion on everything? That's physically impossible. But when you're drunk, you have an opinion on everything. It's true. So I don't drink before the show, but what I do is I sit on in front of my on my desk, in front of my computer, and I channel the drunk inside me. And I go, and so it's like, let's say they're talking about, I don't know, Obamacare. And I go, you know what's wrong with Obamacare? You ever go to 7-Eleven and there's that last hot dog on that thing going around? That's Obamacare. I actually said that. But pretending that you're drunk sometimes allows you to open up part of your brain and say something you haven't said before, and maybe something that no one said before. I'm not saying say awful things. I'm just saying at certain points, you should kind of like free your brain a little bit and go, what would I say if I was wasted? And anyway, the reason why I talk about work is because it's the most important thing to me. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't working. And it pains me to see that we may have a generation or two that doesn't feel the same way, and that's scary. Work doesn't have to be glamorous. All work has to do is fill a hole, not literally, but metaphorically. We all have this hole that we need to fill. And it's weird. You fill it up on Monday. On Tuesday, it's empty. And you fill it up again. And you're like, oh, I feel pretty good. And the next day, you're like, you know, if I don't do it again, I'm going to feel miserable. It's a desire to be something by doing something. And I think that if you lose that hole, you're going to end up in one. And that's what I worry about. We need to re-educate somehow that work is actually, and I hate to say it, but cool, because it sounds so old fogey, but it's cool to sweat, whether it's menial. It's cool to solve problems if they're simple or not. All of these variables are satisfied even by mundane chores. So the most uncool thing you could be doing is nothing and pretending it's something. That's it. Sometimes when people look like a dick, they are.